What's up, guys? Neil Orfield here, and I'm going to show you how I will be setting up my fantasy cruncher for tonight's showdown slate between the Raiders and the Rams. I'll be setting up for the largest field GPP on DraftKings. While you're coming in, please hit that like button on this video, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and hit the notification button so you'll get alerts when our shows go live. All right, first thing I'm going to do is get rid of some players. I'm going to find my quick view. I've got quick view saved, so my columns are going to be where I want them to be. Now in the middle of the screen, I can see my ownership projections from Stokastic, projections, exposure caps, etc., right in the middle of the screen. Next thing I'm going to do, I'm going to sort. I'm going to go to the flex, actually. No, I'm going to keep it here. Sorry. I'm going to sort by projection, and I'm just going to get rid of all players with a projection of 0, with the exception of Baker Mayfield, because that is still up in the air for tonight. Baker Mayfield still might be starting. So I'm going to keep him unchecked. Try and make sure I don't forget to keep him unchecked down here. Sorry, keep him checked. Okay, found him. I'm just going to click and scroll, get rid of all these players that have projections of 0. Looks good. Now those players won't show up when I'm making groups later, so they won't kind of mess things up for me. Okay, looks good. Now I'm going to go into the captain tab here, and I'm just going to set a global exposure cap on all players in the captain spot specifically. Again, setting this at 20%. That can change game to game, but I think 20% once again this game. For most of these that I've done this year, I think 20% has been the cap that I use. I think it's generally a good starting place. And if you look at our top single game showdown tool, you can see that the top optimal is Josh Jacobs at 19%. So we don't have anybody in this game based on our simulations who's in the optimal lineup more often than 20% of the time. So seems like a good enough spot for me to set it at 20%. All right, now I'm going to go into advanced options, and here's where I'm going to do most of my work. First, I'm going to work in the general tab. Then I'm going to move to the groups tab to set up some correlations. So I'm going to set up for a 150 lineup set here. So unique players per lineup in a 150 set, I'm going to leave this at 1 unique player per lineup. So my lineups can be just 1 player apart from each other. If you are making 40 or fewer lineups, let's say, I'd probably set this to 2. That's not an exact number, but if you're kind of in that range, 40 or fewer, I'd probably set this at 2 unique players per lineup just to make sure that my lineups are a bit diversified. Team salary, I'm not going to set a minimum salary. I am going to set a maximum salary. Again, this is just for the purpose of avoiding the most duplicated lineups. Generally, when you run into, lineups that win a tournament and everybody, it's split so many ways that everybody just wins like $3,000. Those are going to be lineups that use the full $50,000 salary cap. So I'm going to set a lower cap than that just to avoid those kinds of lineups. Ideally, if I win, I'd like to win, solo. I'd like to have it by myself, but it's not really what I aim for. I aim to be, 10 or fewer dupes generally, and you can avoid the most duplicated lineups at least by leaving some salary on the table. So I'm leaving $1,000 on the table here to avoid some duplicates. Offensive players versus defense, default is set to 2. I'm going to change this to 5. I think that tonight is a great example of where 5 could come into play. So for example, we get 5 Raiders players versus the Rams defense. So this could work out just as one example. If the Rams offense just sputters, 3 and out time after time, nobody really gets any fantasy points, whereas the Rams defense, has a couple of sacks and maybe a pick 6. That'll be enough that the Rams defense is going to be the best play from the Rams. You got to play at least 1 player from each team. That would be a scenario where the Rams defense is either the highest scoring player or at least the highest point per dollar player from the team, and it can work out. It doesn't happen all that often. It also doesn't come up in my lineups very often, so not a huge concern there, but I'm going to allow for 5 offensive players against the opposing defense. Global exposure cap, leaving this at 100%. I already capped it in the captain spot specifically, but in the flex, I'm going to leave it at 100%. And then randomness, I'm going to use 30%. I think that's a good number where we've got some randomness included, but I also have a good amount of control over my lineups. If you want even more control over your lineups, I would use a number lower than 30%. Minimum projection included in calculation, I'm going to leave that at 3. If there is a player who projects for fewer than 3 fantasy points who I think I want in my player pool, I'm just going to manually boost their projection to above 3 fantasy points. And then players from each team max, I'm going to leave this at 5. So I can have 5 players from one team against just 1 from the opposing team. All right, now I'm going to go to groups to set up some correlations. And I'll start with the easy one, that being Derek Carr at captain. I'm going to make Derek Carr captain my key player. And then I'm going to go ahead and add all of his receiving options to a secondary group. Definitely want to include Josh Jacobs here. He's very involved in the passing game. Amir Abdullah has been, relative to how much he plays, pretty involved in the passing game. I'm just going to add all of these running backs. Probably not going to get to a ton of them anyway. Okay. Looks good. So for this lineup, Derek Carr, not a huge rusher, rushes for fewer than 10 yards per game. I don't think he's rushed for a single touchdown in the past couple of years, but he's certainly got it in his bag of tricks. He could rush for a touchdown. I think he rushed for 3 a few years ago. You could. Now, this is another situation where if you're making 40 or fewer lineups, I would probably just go ahead and say, if you've got Derek Carr in the captain spot, so down here, if any key player used, so that's Derek Carr in the captain spot, then use at least. And if you're making 40 or fewer lineups, I would probably just change this to 2 and just say I want to have at least 2 pass catchers from the Raiders if I have Derek Carr in the captain spot. I've gone over this before, but it's just the scoring system on DraftKings is such that the receiver outscores the quarterback on every passing play. So if you have a quarterback who doesn't have a lot of rushing upside, generally if they're in the captain spot, you're going to need them to be spreading the ball around, getting, they need to obviously score a lot of points to be the optimal captain, and they also are going to need to be spreading the ball around so that their receiver is not outscoring them. So typically, if I have Derek Carr in the captain spot, I want at least 2 pass catchers from the Raiders in the flex in a 150 set. So I'm going to set up for a 150 set here. I'm going to leave it at 1 because I think that Derek Carr obviously has a rushing touchdown, as a possibility for him tonight. So could certainly be the optimal captain with just 1 pass catcher in the flex. But I'm going to require at least 1, and then I'm going to give boost to these other pass catchers. Guys, we have a great offer for new users only. You can get full access to everything Stokastic has to offer for NFL for 3 days free. Projections, ownership, 1v1 tools, lineup generator, top stacks tool, 0 risk because it's all free. So sign up now. The link is in the description of this video. Note that Fantasy Cruncher is an add-on and is not included in this offer. Make it more likely that I get multiple. I actually might not. Davante Adams projects so well already, and we have so few players on this slate that project well that I'm actually not going to give him any kind of boost. I think he's going to get into a lot of these lineups anyway. And Josh Jacobs, same thing. Actually, this might be so. Josh Jacobs actually projects a lot better than Davante Adams. So I want to make it a little bit more likely that I get to Davante Adams rather than Josh Jacobs in these lineups. So I'm just going to give Davante Adams a slight boost, and I'm not going to give any boost to Josh Jacobs. Then I'll give him another slight boost to these other running backs. Okay, so that's what I'm going to do for my Derek Carr group. All right, now the second one is where it gets a little bit trickier because we don't know who the quarterback is tonight for the Rams. Always fun going into a slate. All right, John Wolford, I think, is the most likely quarterback. I'm going to find him in the captain spot. John Wolford at captain, make him my key player, but I'm also going to add Baker Mayfield at captain to this group. Where is he? There we go. Baker Mayfield. I'm going to add him as a key player as well. Just so that once we get this news, I'm obviously just going to remove whichever player is not starting tonight. They say we're not going to get this news until I think inactives come out or just before game time. So we're not going to know for a while who is the starting quarterback for the Rams. That's obnoxious, but we'll make do. I'm going to make this group adding each of them as a captain, as a key player, and then I'll just I won't even have to remove them. They'll just have a projection of 0, whoever's not starting. So it won't be an issue. All right, now I'm going to add all of these Rams pass catchers to secondary group. Running backs not very involved in the passing game for the Rams. I think I could just probably leave these guys out. Of course, all they really need is one touchdown to be relevant in this situation. That's what we're really hoping for. So you could include the running backs, but so far this year, I think the leading running back in terms of targets is Cam Akers with 8 for the Rams. So just not getting enough targets that I think we necessarily need to include them. But you could, if you wanted to, include them and just not give them any kind of boost. I think I'm not going to because I think I'm not going to require multiple pass catchers. I'm just going to do the same thing I did with Derek Carr. John Wolford has shown a little bit more rushing upside than either of these other quarterbacks. I think in his first NFL start, he rushed like 6 times for 56 yards. He hasn't really done it since then, though. I don't know how much rushing upside he has, but he's at least shown a little bit. But still, I think I want at least one pass catcher from the Rams because especially if he's in the captain spot, that means he's putting up a lot of fantasy points and he is fairly expensive. So he's going to need to do some of it through the air. So I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to require at least one of these pass catchers and then also give boosts to all of the other pass catchers to make it more likely that I get multiple when I have John Wolford at captain. And all of these guys project so abysmally that I'm thinking I'm going to give a slightly bigger base boost here. I usually start at 12% just before I run any crunches. I think I'm going to start with 14% here. We'll see how it turns out. Maybe not for Lance McCutcheon. I'll try it. Okay, so those are our captain groups. Now I'm going to do the same thing in the flex. Or again, these quarterbacks don't have enough rushing upside that I think they're likely to be in the optimal without bringing along at least one pass catcher. So I'm just going to require at least one. We almost saw an odd occurrence on this past Monday night slate where Andy Dalton, there was a lineup with Andy Dalton with no pass catchers that came somewhere within like the top 30, and it was duplicated several times, almost made it to the top there. But it's a rare occurrence. It just shows how much he was spreading the ball around in that game. He got to a lot of different receivers at just the right amount. It is possible. It's just such an unlikely scenario that I require multiple, or I require at least one pass catcher with the quarterback. And again, I'm including Josh Jacobs here and Amir Abdullah. I think I can just leave it at those two. And then now, because I have Carr in the flex, I can include these pass catchers in the captain spot as well. Again, including Jacobs. And Abdullah. Okay, I think that's good enough. And for this one, I'm not going to do anything else. I'm just going to require at least one pass catcher. Not going to give any kind of boosts or anything like that. This is all I'm doing. And I'm going to do the same thing with the Rams quarterbacks. Now here you could consider, I think with Wolford in particular, if Wolford is the quarterback, you could consider not requiring a pass catcher from the Rams because, like I said, I don't know that they're going to put up a ton of points tonight. They do have the better matchup against the Raiders defense, but it could be a really bad offense, and it could be a situation where Wolford, rushes for 50 yards. If he rushes for 50 yards and a touchdown, and then maybe throws for an additional 100 and spreads it out, he could be optimal in the flex without any pass catchers. So you could, in this scenario, not require at least one pass catcher, particularly with Wolford, but I think I'm going to build for now requiring at least one. So I'm going to do Wolford in the flex as my key player. I'm also going to add Baker in there. Looks like I did not uncheck Baker, maybe. Well, either way, I'll add him in later. Not the end of the world. Okay, now I'm going to go and add all of these Rams pass catchers to the secondary group. Not including the running backs here. Austin Trammell is a wide receiver. I don't even know who that is. I almost missed him there. I'm going to add him down here as well. Okay, looks good. That's all I'm going to do for this group. I'm just going to say if I have John Wolford, and then later on I'll probably add Baker Mayfield in the quarterback spot as a key player as well. For some reason, I must not have unchecked him. But I'm going to have the quarterback. I'm just going to require at least one pass catcher. Again, if it does come out later that John Wolford is a starting quarterback, maybe I'll consider checking this box in a 150 set and just giving boost to the pass catchers. But I think it's fine just requiring one. I think it's unlikely that John Wolford gets there without bringing along at least one pass catcher. Yeah, 8,800. Honestly, I think that might be the better approach, especially in a 150 set, is to check that box and just give boost to those players, depending on how often he comes up as the only player from the Rams. All right. Now I've made all those correlations. Now I'm going to crunch out 150 lineups using my projections, which are the Stokastic projections. Okay, never heard of the guy, and he projects extremely well. Interesting. Okay, so right away, going to look just at the lineups themselves, see how they correlate, if they correlate the way I'd like them to. First one I see is Derek Carr with several pass catching options. That looks good. Derek Carr in the captain spot, I'd like to have several. Second one is John Wolford with multiple pass catching options. That looks good. John Wolford with just Austin Trammell. John Wolford in the flex with just one. It's just great. Here we've got Wolford with Trammell, Jacobs, Adams, Cole. Carr, Adams, Cole, and then Josh Jacobs there as well. Wolford with McCutcheon looks good. All of these lineups seem to be correlating very well. Here we've got, so Devontae Adams in the captain spot with Josh Jacobs. Yeah, with just two position players, skill players, whatever you want to call them. Looks good. Derek Carr with multiple pass catching options. John Wolford with just one. Again, I think he has the rushing upside that I'm not really concerned about that. Yeah, I think honestly these all look like they are correlating well enough for me. Okay, so the other thing I look at, the two big factors for me, do they correlate well? And am I getting exposures that I like to various players? So starting the quarterback spot, getting to 45% Carr, 35% Wolford. And I'm going to, for the sake of keeping this short, I'm not going to crunch this out a million times. I'm just going to show you. This is just my general process. So I look to make sure the correlations work out well. The second thing I do is I go through position by position up here and look at all the players and say, am I getting as much of this player as I'd like? So starting at quarterback, 45% Carr, 35% Wolford. That seems good. Honestly, I'm not making these decisions right now. I'll think about this later, how much I want of each player. But looking at running back, now I'm getting to 79% Josh Jacobs plus 20% in the captain spot. I don't think I want 99% Josh Jacobs. He does project extremely well. I understand why I'm getting so much, but he comes in, a little bit banged up. He was questionable. He is expected to play. I don't know that I want him in 99% of my lineup. So maybe I would lower his projection or give a thumbs down, which would be a negative 8% boost on his projection, just to get a little bit more, a little bit less Josh Jacobs. Cam Akers getting less than 1%. Maybe I want more than that of Cam Akers. It's a good matchup for him. I don't think he's a great running back, but maybe against this Raiders defense, he'll be able to get something done. Kieran Williams, kind of interesting. Maybe I want a little bit more Kieran Williams. Amir Abdullah coming in at just 8%. Maybe I'll want a bit more Abdullah. These guys currently not in my player pool. Do I want any of these guys in my player pool? Maybe Zamir White. I'll give enough of a boost to get above 3 fantasy points, get him in my player pool. Guys, we have a great offer for new users only. You can get full access to everything Stokastic has to offer for NFL for 3 days free. Projections, ownership, 1v1 tools, lineup generator, top stacks tool, zero risk because it's all free. So sign up now. The link is in the description of this video. Note that Fantasy Cruncher is an add-on and is not included in this offer. Devontae Adams getting to 69% now. Of course, I just lowered Josh Jacobs' projection, which probably means I'll get to more Devontae Adams potentially. Matt Collins only getting to 9%. Maybe I want a little bit more Matt Collins. Oops. Van Jefferson. Somebody's got to catch some balls for the Rams, right? Ben Skoranek. Here, Keelan Cole, I'm getting 51%. Okay, so he's 200. That's why I'm going to sort by salary here. Tutu Atwell, I'm getting just 5%. Brandon Powell getting 19%. I'm getting to a ton of these really cheap guys. And that's because they cost so little, and I set a salary cap. So in order to get the, Josh Jacobs, and there's big gaps today in the highest projected players versus everybody else. So it's saying, to get lineups that project well, you basically need some of those guys, the Devontae Adams, Josh Jacobs, Derek Carr. Those guys project so much better than everybody else. So the way to get them in with my salary cap restraint in particular is to jam in these less expensive guys. So kind of makes sense that I'm getting to a lot of Austin Trammell and Keelan Cole. They both project fairly well for really low salaries. I'm not going to want, I don't think, 50% plus of these guys, though. So we'll see if these things change after I've made adjustments to, some of these higher end players. Maybe I haven't enough, but we'll see. Foster Moreau, maybe I want a little bit more there. Tyler Higbee, maybe I want a little bit more there. Maybe I want Hopkins in my player pool. Get into a lot of Daniel Carlson. Not going to change that. Should probably get less naturally as I adjust other players because projections are all relative to each other. All right, getting to a decent amount of Raiders defense. Honestly, I don't know what the right amount of Raiders defense is here. It's not a great defense, but the offense they're playing against is not great either. All right, so let's try this out. Crunch one more time. And this is going to be my final crunch for this video. Again, these correlations that I'm seeing right away look good enough. Quarterbacks seem to be paired pretty well with pass catchers. Multiple when they're in the captain spot. That's what I want to see. All right, so you can see now after I've made all of those adjustments to all these positions, now I've gone from 20% Raiders defense to 7% Raiders defense. So I go through this several times. I crunch many times before I pinpoint the exact or close enough to the exposures that I want before I export and put some lineups into DraftKings. Currently, if I see this, now I'd probably come back and I'd probably give a little bit of a boost to the Raiders. I don't think I want just 7%. I think they have a shot to be really good against John Wolford, so maybe I'll give them a little boost. And then, of course, I know, even if I want 14.7% of the Rams, I'm probably going to have to give them a little bit of a boost here just to keep up with other adjustments I'm going to make. A little bit of a boost. Matt Gay, maybe these are fine numbers, but I'll give him a little boost to keep up. Wouldn't mind getting a little bit less Daniel Carlson, I think. Still not getting much of any of these tight ends. Maybe I want some more Foster Moreau, Tyler Higbee. Seems like a fine amount of Bryson Hopkins. Still not getting to much Matt Collins. Still getting to 70%. Devontae Adams again. Devontae Adams and Josh Jacobs just project so much better than everybody else. It makes sense. And these guys still get into a ton of them. Maybe I need to, as I boost others, I'll get less. I'm totally sure that I will because they still are the only way to get to the most expensive players. And those guys just project so well. It's going to take a lot of changes probably. All right, so still not getting any of these cheap running backs. Don't know that I really want to anyway, but do I give them a little boost? Probably want more than 10% total of these Rams running backs, not necessarily. And I'm also going to lower Josh Jacobs here a little bit, get him closer to Devontae Adams. Again, I don't think I want 90%. And then I will crunch again. Like I said, that last one was going to be my final crunch. Okay, this one, definitely my final crunch, just to show you one last time. Okay, now I'm getting to more of Kieran Williams, not so much Cam Akers. Maybe I'd adjust him. Got to finally a little bit less Josh Jacobs, still a ton of Josh Jacobs. So getting to a lot of Devontae Adams. Makes sense. Those guys just project so well. Still getting a ton of these guys. Again, it takes incremental changes. I'm not going to go through. Sometimes I'll crunch 30 times for one game. I'm not going to do that on this video. Just trying to show you my general process, which is just looking at correlations, making sure the correlations continue to make sense, and then looking at player exposures and making incremental changes to projections until I get to exposure levels that I like of all players. But again, I'm going to leave it here for now. Hope you can use this or a similar process to find some success tonight. Good luck.